Hi folks, Matt Easton here, Scholar Gladiatoria. So as many of you know, I do reviews of HEMA gear, HEMA equipment from time to time, and I have been sent, so disclaimer at the beginning of this, I have been sent this mask by PBT in Hungary. Anybody who does HEMA will know of PBT. They're a Hungarian fencing equipment manufacturer, and they are expanding their range of HEMA specific gear, and actually they do quite a lot of HEMA specific stuff now. Other manufacturers as well, people like Leon Paul, All Star, are also doing HEMA specific gear, so it is a growing market, and it's really great for those of us who've been doing HEMA for more than 10 years to see this gear at last start to be customized to our needs. Now this is a HEMA specific mask. There are a few different HEMA masks around at the moment, and at the moment there's some questions about what exactly is needed from a fencing mask for HEMA. Now obviously HEMA covers a lot of different disciplines. At one end it could be boxing and wrestling, but as far as sort of swords are concerned, or weapons, it could be covering, you know, small sword, rapier, so relatively light weapons, dueling saber, or indeed it could be going right the way up to long sword, sword and buckler, mesa, these types of things. And they have different requirements. So to a certain extent, with the size of the market it is at the moment, certainly for people doing small sword, a sport fencing mask is probably completely adequate. Probably for a lot of people doing rapier, that's true as well. However, for people using the heavier weapons like long sword, sword and buckler, military saber, stuff like this, there are certain things that we need out of a mask that fencing masks, standard fencing masks, aren't really providing. And this is one attempt to move towards something which is better for HEMA. Now there are two main adaptations on this mask which I should talk about. It looks, as you will see, more or less like a standard mask, but you might be thinking it looks rather big, and there is a reason for that. So the first adaptation is that this part of the mask, so a fencing mask is essentially made out of two bits of mesh. One is made into a dome on the front, which is actually the mask bit. Original old Victorian foil fencing masks just have that bit, and then this bit which goes over the head and down the sides on each side, which is like a tube essentially, which is attached to the front part, that is in this case made longer. Now that doesn't necessarily, when I originally saw this on the internet, on the webs, I assumed that it meant that the mesh was further from the face. And it is maybe slightly further from the face, but actually what it's mainly doing is up till about that point, it's a normal size fencing mask, but then it continues. Now that's a very interesting, I don't know why, I had never thought of doing that. It's actually quite ingenious. So one of the things that we require is back of head protection. Now, back of head protection is not something that's required in sport fencing, generally speaking, so it's not like fencing masks haven't evolved to kind of have it and need it. We tend to add external pads or plates onto the back of the fencing mask, and indeed they're regulation in most HEMA competitions, and I would always want to wear one, because obviously if whether a hit intentionally or unintentionally from either party comes around the back, you do not want to get a steel or even a nylon blade hitting you in the back of the skull. Theoretically it could break your skull, but at the very least it could give you a nasty cut or contusion. So by and large there are things added to the backs of masks to protect them. Now there are some that go inside the mask sort of frame, and I prefer those. And there are some that are known as overlays, generally speaking, which are like a pad which go over the top and then hang down the back. I'm not sure which type of back of head protection this is designed to go with, but I think that they've left that pretty much up to the user. But certainly as far as the mask is concerned, what it's done is by extending the back further back, it means that it protects, certainly from downwards blows, it protects a very good part of your head. If I just put it on and then turn sideways, you'll see what I mean. So, mask on in the standard fashion. There's nothing unusual about the fitting inside really. There's no chin straps or anything like that. So, mask on. Now you'll see that my face is pretty much the same distance from the front of the mask, maybe slightly further away from the front of the mask than with a standard mask. but the back now projects very, very far. Now, the back of my actual head is quite deep inside that tube now, which means that any blows coming down here are going to be quite a long way away from my head. What that means is that I can put a plate or pad or whatever usually attached to this elastic strap, which is the usual method of attachment for most fencing masks. So I can attach something to there, and it means that the back of head protector will actually be quite deep inside the mask, which is quite an interesting thing, because it means that that edge, which is really, you know, all it's adding is just a strip of mesh. It's not adding much weight, but it is steel and it is tough, that stuff. And yeah, it might get dents, it might get hit and damaged slightly in use, but it's going to be quite far away from your head, so it's giving the back of your head and neck, even to an extent, really quite a lot of additional protection for really no extra sort of material or weight, none, you know, not a considerable amount anyway. So I think that's a really, really good idea. Now, the second adaptation is going to be difficult for me to show to you in this light, but if I just try and catch the light correctly in there, I don't know if you can see, there we go, a bar going across there, and then a series of bars coming up here. Now obviously I'll put the web link to the web, obviously PBT's website where they sell this mask. I'll put that below and you can see pictures in there. I'll also, it's very, very difficult for me to show because it's behind a whole load of padding. There we go, you can actually see, I'm surprised. Right, if I get the angle right, can you see that in there? Those are steel bars. Now they're flat, I would imagine mild steel, might be wrong, but they're steel anyway, flat steel, and they're probably, from feeling them, about 2mm thick is my estimate, from handling lots of armour that happens to be either 1.5 or 2mm thick, and those bars actually have a historical precedent. So in the late 19th century particularly, there were masks, and I own one actually, I must do a video about that at some point. There were masks which were specially made for military sabre and bayonet fencing. Different types of masks for each. Sometimes they use the same mask, but usually bayonet masks are a bit different from sabre masks. Now, on some of those, they have bars added to strengthen this portion of the mask, but they're usually on the outside. In this case, they've put them on the inside. Now that has some pluses and minuses. By having it on the inside, it does mean that the outside of your mesh is going to get more damaged. Okay, so the idea of having the bars on the outside is so the bars being very thick and strong, they get hit, they're not really going to bend because they're too thick to bend, generally speaking. They're usually cylindrical section bars on the historical ones rather than flat bars as on here. But the bars that are mounted over here will take all of the force and protect your mesh underneath. The disadvantage is things can get stuck under those bars, not necessarily all the way under, but a point of a blade, for example, if it hits you in the face, will then, rather than glancing off as it would do with this sort of mask, usually, it will get stuck under that bar and the blade will bend, and it has a higher risk of breaking, or indeed getting stuck under the bar if it's possible for that to happen. So the advantage of having the bars underneath the mesh is that you've got a nice smooth surface and it looks clean and smooth from the outside and there's no things to get stuck on here. The disadvantage is that mesh will still get damaged, so what happens with a lot of masks when they get heavy hits up here is they take little dents. Now these bars underneath are to prevent that and keep it, if a dent does happen, keep it further away from your head. So it's adding a huge amount of rigidity here. Now what I would suggest to PBT and to manufacturers in general is what HEMA masks really should have is this is the area that usually gets the most punishment in HEMA from heavy blows, because downward blows tend to have more force and most blows tend to be downwards blows. Okay, so for all the reasons, this part of the mask is generally speaking the most punished, and if you look at any old club mask you can see that this is where they get all the dents. They might have dents somewhere else, but this is where most of them land. I would suggest that all HEMA masks should start to have an integrated outer fixed plastic like that, just sort of covering on the top to protect the mesh. It will do an awful lot to protect the mesh, and there's no reason really not to have it. It doesn't really add any noticeable weight, so why not have one there? It could even be removable. You could even have press studs on here, and you could press stud a little cowl on the front. What I'm not a fan of are the full mask covers. Some people will go, oh Matt, we've already got those, we've already got the full covers for the masks. I really hate those. Number one, they're heavy. Number two, they're insanely hot, okay? Fencing masks and padded jackets are hot enough already. We do not need to be sticking what's the equivalent of an oven glove over our head as well as a mask. It's just horrible, and it's not necessary. This part of the mask up here rarely gets dented in my 15 years of experience of HEMA. It's here that gets dented. So if we're going to have a pad or a plate, have it here alone. Where those bars are, okay, but we need something really on the outside of the mesh, in my opinion. And obviously this is something that people could mod themselves, but ideally we want stuff to be made for us and ready off the shelf so that our students can just go and buy a thing and it's ready to go without needing to be modded. So those bars look very promising. Now, I'm just going to finish up, rather than witter on for ages, I'm going to finish up by saying I have not used this mask yet. I'm going to use this mask at training tomorrow. It fits very well, it's very comfortable. It's like a standard fencing mask once it's on your head. But the two main adaptations are the bars underneath here, seem promising, and the extra bit of mesh on here. I can't see any disadvantage to having that. That only seems like a good idea to me. Great idea, PBT. You were the first to do it, well done. The bars on the inside also seem like a really, really good idea. One slight thing I'll mention is when you've got the mask on, and I'll stick it up, I can see the bar here, okay? Now, that doesn't really matter to me. It's no different to wearing a helmet or even a pith helmet or a hard hat or something like that, or even a hat with a brim on it. I can see that bar going through here, and I can see the radiating bars going up there. So yes, I do have a little bit of a blind spot up here. However, if you're wearing any sort of, in a historical environment, wearing any sort of helmet or hat, you're going to have that anyway. So I personally don't have a problem with that. I think for the added protection and resistance up there, I'm absolutely happy with that, and my vision here is completely as normal. So really it just stands up now for me to see how this works in sparring and see how the mesh stands up. As some of my viewers and subscribers on the Facebook page, which is linked below, will know, I've had some issues and other people I know have had some issues with masks, HEMA masks, denting in practice and breaking in some cases in practice recently, and so that's really what I'm most wary for and what I'm looking for. So what I'm looking for from this mask now is I know it fits good, I know it's got good extra bit of back of head protection, I like those bars, you know, everything else about it seems good, the price seems good. So all I'm looking for now really is how does that mesh stand up, and that's what I'm going to be finding out this week and Friday as well at training, and in coming weeks as well. So I will report back with an update review of this when I've had a chance to use it more in combat. Cheers folks! Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, follow us on Facebook, you can buy t-shirts through Spreadshirt, support us on Patreon or follow us on Pinterest. Thank you.